So we are kind of going to try and be looking into the future. Has anyone here got an electric motorhome? Of course you haven't. So why are we doing this? So we want to take a glimpse into the future, what the future will hold. And I say that informedly. Our motorhomes will become electric powered in the future. People will have views on all sorts of other types of powertrain that might be possible. And yes, they might be possible. Electric will feature, I promise you. It doesn't feature yet. So what we want to try and do in this session is try and gather some comments, your thoughts and questions. Hopefully you've come today with some comments or questions or observations that you think you want to contribute. That's great, because what John and I want to do is try and fly the flag for our corner of this world, of this little niche we call motorhoming and campervanning, and try and raise those issues to the people who are going to influence how we do that. Now, we've got some great little coup. Have you heard of Quentin Wilson? So Quentin used to present Top Gear, did for 10 years. You're all of an age where you remember him. John doesn't remember Quentin.
I do. I'm that old. I remember.
Tash doesn't. Darren doesn't. They're too young. Now, Quentin has agreed to come on the podcast, the Motorhome app podcast, and discuss what we talk about today. Now, I think that's exciting because Quentin is a massive influencer in the world of EV. And he's headlining a campaign called Fair Charge and is lobbying government, lobbying the converters, the charging companies. And he's a highly respected, I think he writes for The Telegraph, he writes for Classic Car magazine, highly respected individual, as you know. And he's agreed to listen to what we've got to say. So we are recording this session. So if you've got a question and you would rather your name didn't get mentioned, that's fine, absolutely fine. Just don't say your name when you get given the microphone. But we are deliberately recording it, just so you're aware, on audio. Mike's also recording it on video as well. So we can use it in the future and reference it. So hopefully this is the start of something, because I think our corner of the world is important. Do you agree? It is. How we use motorhomes is really crucial. And if they change to electric, how do you charge them? There's lots of issues, isn't there? So we're going to unpack some more of that. Now, in terms of, just very quickly to give a framework to this, you might be aware that in 2030, all new vehicles have to be able to travel 80 miles without using fossil fuel. This is new cars, new vans, every new vehicle. And by 2035, all new vehicles have to be able to travel without using fossil fuel at all. 2035 is 12 years away. I don't know about you, but I don't think we're ready. Do you think we're ready? Nowhere near, are we? There's a long journey to go on, and we want to start unpacking the concerns we've got about that today. So it's really important. But I think the journey to carbon net zero, which is that phrase that's get bandied around, is really crucial, because I think it's really important that we take responsibility for the planet, for our kids, for their kids, and their kids, because that's important too. Do you agree? And what we do now, I was watching the news last night. I get the pleasure of going home because I live 24 minutes away from this showground. And we were watching BBC One last night on the telly over fish and chips. And have you seen the fires that are going on and the floods that are going on around the world, really close to home? My brother has had to flee his home because the whole of Spokane, where he lives, is on fire. And our friends in Yellowknife in northern Canada, they are 3 days away in Alberta because they've lost their house to a fire. This is close to home. I was chatting to someone this morning. He said, I don't believe all that. It's not climate change. Doesn't affect me. I said, yeah, but when it's your family, you realise how real this is for those people. So, not going to get all emotional about it. We're here to discuss the facts. And hopefully, if you might have concerns, whether they're factual or not, we want to talk about them. So John is a real passion for electric future, electric motorhomes. Tell us a bit about your passion for that, John.
So, I'm a petrolhead. Well, I started out as a petrolhead. So I've done 20 years in the motor industry. So I used to fix engines. So I know all the limitations and advantages of engines. So I've come from that industry, really. But I think the first time for me that I realised that I've been wrong or not wrong, but not correct for a good...
In that wrong?
Yeah. I'd word it in a different way. It was when I drove my first electric vehicle. And as soon as I drove my first electric vehicle, I was like, it was a bit of a sobering moment where I thought, actually, maybe all this playing around with engines and tinkering and all this and trying to make them go faster, and maybe that just wasn't the way forward. So yeah, it was quite an interesting and sobering time.
Yeah. So we just want to talk about the options that are open to us now. So you can buy an electric camper van now. What are our options now?
So we have probably the best one at the moment is the Stellantis group. So the Vauxhall eVivaro, the Peugeot e-Expert. So it's a mid-sized, like transit-sized or VW transporter-sized vehicle with a camper for conversions, pop top. So there's a few companies already doing them. Campervan Co, Hillside Leisure are already doing them, so they are available already. You know, a decent, and those ones will go well over 200 miles, even with the conversion on them, and they will charge quickly as well. So yeah, the pop top campers we are available already.
And of course the ID Buzz VW.
Yes, and the ID Buzz is. I mean, I think there was more ID buzzes in Germany at the Caravan Salon. There's probably more ID buzzes than I would imagine anything else.
There were, that's the only electric vehicle we saw, really.
For my mind, I think the ID Buzz is a little bit small. It's kind of like we've had in fact, the first electric camper van we've had is the EMV 200 on a pop-top basis. Now, it is quite a small van, so even with, if you've got two people in one of them, it is quite tight. And the ID Buzz is about that size, and they are really small. But so there are lots of other manufacturers doing vans out.
I tell you, there's a big show in Germany last week called Caravan Salon, and I had the privilege to go out, and Tash and Darren were there as well, walking around looking lost, and we were trying to play Spot the Electric Vehicle, weren't we? And we clocked an X-Bus. That was quite cool. Pug ugly, if you ask me. I don't know why some of these new electric vans are so odd looking. They look like something out of a kid's cartoon, don't they?
Yeah.
There's new brands as well coming online. So Volt are another manufacturer, and I suspect we're going to see a lot of manufacturers combine to unite technologies and bring us vans that are viable. I think there's a lot going to come online that we've not even dreamt of, let alone seen yet. So I think it's an exciting time to be witnessing this. Interestingly, Iveco, they have an electric van, the e-Iveco. Who thought that? No, it's called the E-Daily, isn't it?
E-Daily, yes. That's it.
Yeah, that's right. The Iveco Daily. Now, you see those now. You don't see many Motorhomes on, though, do you?
Not yet. They're going to be high end, I would imagine.
Yeah, they're going to be big. So they're high floor because they're rear wheel drive. So they've got four wheels across the back. But interestingly, the E-Daily has just set a new world record for the 3.5 ton van. It's an official Guinness World Record for the heaviest weight towed by an electric van. Any idea how much it towed? How many tons? Go on, have a guess. 1 ton. No, bit more. 2 tons. Keep going. We could be here a while. 50 tons. Keep going. No, higher than 50. 153 tons. It towed a flatbed articulated lorry with a huge digger on it, and it towed it from a standing start. This is a 3.5 ton van, like the one many of us drive, rear wheel drive. It only towed it 100 feet, but that was enough for a world record. That is a testament to the torque that an electric engine gives you, electric powertrain gives you. It was phenomenal. So it's a new world record has been set, which I think is pretty exciting, even 100 feet. So, John, you drive a Fiat Ducato motorhome.
I do.
An A-Class, it's an Adriasonic.
Yes.
He's a poser on a campsite when he rocks in his A-Class. But you would convert it to electric, you said to me.
I would definitely consider it.
How would you do that?
I'll just take it to there are quite a few companies that are already converting ICE vehicles to electric. Electra actually converts some of they get chassis straight from Mercedes-Benz, straight from Dennis, and they actually convert those chassis for the refuse collection and things like that. They actually convert those chassis straight from new, still got manufacturer's warranty from Mercedes, and they actually convert those. And they're big dust carts and things like that. So there are a few, and it is a hugely growing market as well. Obviously, if we can get to a stage where we can start to convert vehicles, because we've got got to appreciate that there are an awful lot of vehicles already out there that are perfectly serviceable. We don't want to throw them away and then build something completely new. We want to try and transition it and make it a little bit easier. And my view is, I think that a motorhome lasts probably 20 years. I think the average motorhome age or the average lifetime of a motorhome is 18 years. So my van has still got plenty of life left in it, so I don't want to junk it and go and buy an electric one. Obviously, I can't at the moment. But yeah, I think it will be quite important that we convert actually some of the vehicles that are already out there. Because if we junk all of them and replace them with electric, then that's not going to work either. No. So we need to be careful on how we do it and how we transition.
And when I was in Germany, we saw a company called Iridium.
Yes.
I don't know if any of you follow Andrew Ditton on YouTube? He 4 years ago drove this electric motorhome. It was a Moveo motorhome, 3.5-ton motorhome, and it had been converted to an electric power plant. So the engine had been taken out and this electric motor put in. And I remember watching this video 4 years ago and thinking, blimey, we're off. This is it. The future's here. And he put his foot down and went, wow, this is no slouch. Yeah. And was really impressed, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Anyway, in Germany last week, I met the guy from Iridium, and the van was there, the van that Andrew drove, and covered in dead flies at the front. They hadn't cleaned it very well, I have to say. And I said, what are you doing with this? He said, nothing. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, we've turned the project off. I said, why? I said, surely there's a demand from Muppets like John who want to convert his diesel motorhome to an electric milk float. It's what it becomes, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
And I said, why are you turning it off? Now, when Andrew drove it 4 years ago, he said it was a €200,000 motorhome. That's what it would cost. That's a lot of money, isn't it? Even by today's standards. I said, what would it cost now? He said, €250,000 to take a brand new Moveo motorhome, which is an average. We don't see Moveo in the UK very much. I guess it's kind of a Swift eldest kind of price band, I would say.
On the Rapido.
Yeah, they're kind of Rapido's kind of budget. I'll probably get told off saying that, but it's that kind of price point. That if you know anything about motorhomes. And €250,000. So £250,000, well, that's just not viable, is it? And they realised that, so they binned it. So there's a cheap electric motorhome going for sale, left-hand drive. I said, well, what will you do with it? He went, just keep it. Can't sell it. It's a prototype. Can't insure it. So not to be sold anyway. So they've turned the project off and they're just going to focus on converting the Ford e-Transit. So next year, they had one on the stand all blacked out, tempting us. And I think we're going to see the e-Transit, aren't we? In fact, the October NEC, Bayley have converted an e-Transit to a campervan. It's a big secret at the moment. Some of us have had the pleasure of witnessing it as press. In fact, we're going at the end of this month to film it and do a feature on it. It will be launched at the NEC, and it's really cool. Some really, really, really good innovation within it. Very environmentally friendly stuff going on in it. So if you're going to the NEC show in Birmingham, then do take a look at that, because well, you can't buy one. So at the moment, it's a prototype. So they're launching their transit campervan, the Endeavour, and at the show, which you can buy. I don't know how much that is. Do you know? 80k, I'm guessing? 70, 80k, I imagine. An electric transit isn't viable yet, but they're anticipating they might start building on it next year. There's still a lot to work on it. Ford have only just made the front seat spin and homologated that, which means they've conformed to the legal requirements to have the front seats that spin. The Bayley one doesn't, I can tell you that. So when you go on the stand, say, why don't the front seats spin? And they'll all get annoyed that everyone keeps coming on, and because that was my first question, and they don't like it. Anyway, John, you asked a question. We put a call out for questions in this little video that you saw at the start, and we've had quite a few. We're hoping that you've got some questions today that you're prepared to share. We got a couple of people nodding, so we'll come to you in a minute with the mic. Michael's going to run around with the mic. But we had a question from John to himself, and he said,
I do watch the podcast.
This is how
it proves to you that I do watch the podcast.
You do.
Very good.
But I love you asked yourself a question. What battery density would you estimate kilowatt hours per tonne would be required for an average 5-tonne motorhome to be viable for a range of 300 miles?
I think I was asking Paul Kirby this, because I think he's a little bit more He's a little bit more...
So Paul Kirby is a guy I did a session with at Campervan Camp Out. He's known as the electric van man, and he's been tipped the 5th most influential man in the world of EV. And like Quentin, Paul is a fan of the podcast, and he is also going to get involved with me in our feedback today. So I'm going to be picking his brain on what we talk about today.
And also you had the guy from Ford as well.
We had the head of Ford Pro, Ryan Bowditch. Yeah.
Yes, and I wanted to ask him as well, but I've sort of worked out myself. I think I need about 150 kilowatt hours.
And what's the biggest capability on any van at the moment?
100 on the Iveco.
So we're 2/3 there.
Yeah, we're nearly there.
So how far would that take a 3.5 ton motorhome?
About 300 miles, I think that was the question.
What, the current van?
Yes. Yeah.
So you could go 300 miles in an electric van now?
Yes.
At 3.5 ton?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Ish.
And what payload would you have?
Ish. I was working on the basis of 4.2 tons.
Okay, so over 3.5 tons.
Yeah,
So,
over 3.5. It's going to have to be over, I think.
so there's a lot of myths, I think, that are probably floating around the room in our heads at the moment. There's a lot of pub conversations that go on. And I've been privileged to have conversations with a lot of people in this EV industry. And I've thrown these challenges at them, about weight and payload. Payload is really important. Payload is the difference between what your van weighs when it's empty and what it's allowed to weigh when it's full. Now, you put a load of batteries in it, it's going to weigh 3.5 ton, probably they're heavy. Now, did you know that an electric van, an all-electric van, is automatically allowed to be 4.25 tons? You can drive it on a normal licence at 4.25 tons. There's a cap on our licences at 3.5 tons. That applies to vans. Doesn't apply to motorhomes yet, because they don't exist. But it's interesting, isn't it, that has been lifted to allow vans to be viable. Did anyone know that? See? They don't get talked about. So there's an immediate myth dismissed that batteries aren't viable in a motorhome because we won't have the payload. They could be. The government are currently reviewing the C1 licence entitlement. I'm increasingly erring toward they're not going to lift it. So in 2021, they dismissed the limitation on towing. So you can tow now up to 3.5 ton, provided your vehicle can do it, and your vehicle is 3.5 ton. So the B+E entitlement was dismissed very quickly and very quietly. They're currently reviewing the C1 limitation. Does everyone not know what the C1 limitation is? Good. Okay, great. Now, they're due to announce something on the 21st of September. It's at the end of the month. I'm of the view they're not going to lift it. Sorry, Tash, you're going to have to take your C1 test to drive your own motorhome. Only because it's taken so long. So the B+E was really quick. So we've had a few questions emailed in, and I'm going to read a couple.
I'll just chime in there as well. I think with the battery technology, we are on the crest of a wave, I think, at the moment. And believe it or not, lithium-ion technology, which is what we pretty much use in all these EVs, it's actually quite old. Believe it or not, it's quite an old technology. So we are working with the technology that we've had for quite some time. It's just the fact that we've managed to get them down to a price point where in passenger cars, they very much work. So every single university in the world, some of the brightest minds in the world, are working on new battery technologies, new battery chemistries that are just, I don't see myself as particularly clever, but these guys are just, they go to bed thinking about it and they wake up thinking about it. So I think, and whoever comes out with this technology is going to be extremely well off. So everybody is racing to get lighter, more energy-dense batteries as well. So I don't think we'll be stuck with what we've got for very long either. So I'll probably add that to it.
Yeah, fair. Okay. David Loater Adams emailed in, said, I don't think they're plausible at the moment or any time in the future because the vans just aren't good enough. Even the ones for delivery drivers are no good. Seen a few now that are a few years old and are breaking down and can be seen at the side of the road. And they have to be plugged in every night after doing their deliveries. Well, it's a battery-powered van. Of course it does.
It's the same as you'd have to refuel a normal van.
Well, I think that's something that, for me, this transition is as much about education as it is about anything else. I think we're going to spend the next 10 years unlearning what we've been doing for 100 years.
That is a very
our mentality at the moment is once a week, we drive to the fuel station and spend 10 minutes at a pump and we fill up and then we don't think about it again, do we? We go on a journey. Have you ever been on a journey and worried about getting diesel or petrol? Not very often. Yeah, you have. Okay. Yeah, but you live on Jersey. But it doesn't happen very often. My point is, we don't generally think about it. And there's this mindset that with an electric van or electric car, you have to worry. Range anxiety, they call it. Did you know that there are less cars running out of battery power and being recovered by the AA or the RAC than there are cars running out of fuel or petrol? It's just not a thing. Go on, yeah. Human error, yeah. That is just human error, you're right. Yeah, a booster battery in the boot. Like a jump start. Yeah. Good idea. Yeah, good idea. But the myth that range anxiety means that electric cars are just running out of power all the time, it isn't true. Not if you talk to the AA and the RAC. And yes, they've created technology that mean they can recover vehicles, but do you know what the number one reason is they go out to a broken down EV? Having spoken to Edmund King, the president of the AA, and Paul Coward, the CEO of the RAC, I asked them both, do you know what it is? Software issues? No, good guess. Anyone else want to take a guess? It wasn't. And you work for the breakdown services? No. Vehicle engineer, okay, right. So broken down Teslas. The number one call out is flat tyres. Potholes. There's a common issue for any type of car. It's hardly any are going flat. And I think the risk is we start to believe these pub conversations, if I can call them that. Do you know what I mean? And I think there's a real demand on government to educate us. And the people who are making these changes, the people who are influencing the future, they need to tell us the truth. You know, we read this stuff in the Daily Mail. Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean, recently put an article in The Guardian, and it was his experience that he felt he'd been conned. He'd been driving an electric car for years, knowing him it was probably a McLaren or something exotic, but he felt the whole thing was a con. And he got absolutely charged by the electric, there's a turn of phrase, by the electric vehicle community. You know, they actually dived on him with all this misinformation. He was quoting facts from years ago. Nonetheless, his experience, he'd felt conned by the whole thing. You can't deny him that. But the facts he was quoting were from data that had been dismissed years ago. And none of that got any airtime in The Guardian. His piece did. And so the media are partly responsible for this. And you have to start asking yourself the question, why? Who's going to lose out if we go electric? The fuel companies make a lot of money out of us, don't they? By us buying diesel and petrol. I am very cynical about the change. I believe in the change and I want to see the change, but I think there's a big agenda in the background. And you know, that as may be, how we use our motorhomes is really important to that change being effective. Yeah. Shall I go for another question? And then if you've got a question, stick your hand up. We'd love to have it. So the trailer lady, she's a driving instructor who I got the pleasure of meeting at a show recently. The technology for electric vehicles is astonishing, but until the infrastructure is in place to support it, groups of motorists like motorhomers will not embrace it. My biggest concern is the environmental impact on the manufacture and disposal of these batteries. So two things there, John, which I just want to pick your brain on. Firstly, is the technology that goes into it and the infrastructure around it. There are more charging points in the UK than there are fuel stations. That's a fact. But only 20% of them are working.
That's right, yes.
That's probably not a fact.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the charging infrastructure has got to absolutely change. It needs to be everywhere. They need to be all working. If they don't work, they need to be fixed within hours. And one of the charging companies said to me that a lot of the time it's actually the software on the cars which stop the chargers working. So they'll plug in, they won't do the handshake properly. So it's actually sometimes the software developers on the car side, not the chargers. And generally when they reboot the chargers work. You plug a different vehicle in and they work straight away. So sometimes it is actually the vehicle. So the vehicle manufacturers need to come and standardise everything as well. But yeah, the infrastructure just needs to massively improve. And also we've seen, motorhomes are large. there's no getting away from the fact that we drive around in 7 metre, sometimes more than that, motorhomes. We need, who's been to the motorway services and seen the size of the spaces of the grid surf parking? You struggle to get a car in there, let alone a motorhome. So, but in Europe, of course, they seem to be way ahead on the curve. They've got Ned, I can't remember the charging company, but they have all pull-through chargers. You don't park, you literally just pull up like a petrol station, charge, and then drive out. There's no parking involved. You just drive into a
But that's important if you're towing a caravan. I mean,
yeah, that's it. And obviously, we are.
What do you do with a caravan?
Leisure industry, yeah. You definitely need. Andrew Ditton has to take his caravan off his car a lot of the time to charge, which you just can't do. You just can't do that. So we need this to be thought of for the transition to work.
The other half of the question that the trailer lady, the big topic is about recycling of the batteries.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's lots of, again, I call it pub talk around the fact the battery is only going to last so many years, and they're going to cost £18,000. You probably know, sir, how much it costs to replace a battery on a Tesla. 15 grand. So that's just not viable, though, is it? It's not. But the reality is, and you may have a different experience, there's lots of companies now coming to the fore that can recycle these EV batteries, and actually the lifespan of some of the new ones coming online is much longer, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a common one. It's quite an old one. I mean, when we first had electric vehicles, you're talking Nissan Leaf, the Renault Zoe, they actually sold them with battery leases. Because they had no thermal management on the batteries. So when they were charging, sometimes the batteries were actually too cold for them to be charged, which is why Nissan and Renault chose to go with a battery lease, because they were expecting that they would be having to replace these batteries. And they did replace some of these batteries. They were replacing in like 5 years because they hadn't had the thermal management. However, since I can't remember the year, but everything now has thermal management on the battery. So the batteries are lasting way more than even the manufacturers thought. I mean, most manufacturers are putting 10-year battery warranties on their vehicles.
And 100,000 miles. And some are predicted to last 300,000 miles. Anyone here got a car that's done 300,000 miles?
Yeah. And me working in the industry, obviously, I think somebody said they had a Tesla, which was a taxi. They used the Tesla as a taxi or a limousine, should we say. And that had 300,000 miles on it. So that needed a battery after 300,000 miles. But me working in the motor industry and working on engines, there's not many engines out there that would go without replacing an engine in 300,000 miles.
No.
And unfortunately, we have got to a situation where the latest engines are actually a little bit more unreliable than the older engines. So now we're trying to make the engines cleaner. Unfortunately, the internal combustion engine is actually becoming more unreliable.
They have to work a lot harder, aren't they?
As we try to go cleaner, they are having to work an awful lot harder. They've got all sorts of emission controls in the way. Normally the best way to run an engine is to get the air in and to get the air out as fast as you possibly can. That's the cleanest way to run an engine. However, when you put catalyst, diesel particulate filters, AdBlue in there, AdBlue catalysts as well, or SCR catalysts, that's all those exhaust gases are going through that, and that is actually reducing the flow through the engine, so that it does actually cause problems. And I saw before I left the motor industry that we were seeing huge problems with them.
There were some big words in there, John. Some of us understood it. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about as well is battery recycling. Yeah. So there are some companies on the planet now that can take an EV battery and strip it back to its core component. And actually, an EV car battery can now be 100% recycled. And the black gold that's in the battery can be reused to make a new battery. And again, this doesn't really get get talked about. The other thing that I've discovered from talking to the people who are in the know, and I'm no expert on this at all, but I'm trying to talk to them and find out more about it, is that the second and third life of a battery. So the battery could be taken out of an EV car that might only be 80% effective after 7 or 8 years. And with a good battery management system, that's the impact it's going to have. It's going to be really effective still. But you could be taken out and used in a house to store power. And so to store energy from solar and used to run our houses, to use to run our heating systems and so on. And this, again, is just not something, I don't know if you're aware of this stuff, but I'm just not seeing this in mainstream media. I'm having to dig into real corners of this industry to find this stuff out in order to dismiss some of the myths. So the idea that an EV battery just isn't effective long term isn't true at all. They really are. And actually EV cars need a lot less servicing as well, don't they?
Yes, the servicing can be an awful lot less.
The original Teslas had free charging for how long?
For life of the vehicle. In fact, there's still Teslas out there now that have free charging.
Wow, imagine that, free fuel forever. That's pretty good, isn't it?
Which is why a lot of people invested. But, just going back to the battery recycling, we are, at the crest of the wave on that, because we've never had to recycle EV batteries before.
No.
So the ones that were taken out of like the Renault Zoes and the Leafs, most of them were actually used for battery storage, just used for energy storage. When they got to a point where they weren't useful in the vehicle, people just took them out and used them as energy storage. So that's the first life for a battery. And then the last resort is actually to recycle it completely down to its core components. So then hopefully we're not mining as much as we normally would to try and transition. But yes, Sweden have already got a factory ready to go, really, that can completely recycle the battery.
And it's interesting, the Stellantis group, who own Fiat, Peugeot, Citroën, the common badge on the front of our motorhomes for many years, have just launched a new factory. Only building, this mic's gone off.
Oh, Matt.
Very good. Very good. Plug me in.
These are using disposable batteries, by the way. So.
Yeah, they are. They'll go in the bin, sadly. So Stellantis Group built a new factory only building electric vehicles. So they're focused on their cars. So we're going to start seeing Fiat, Citroën, Peugeot, Vauxhall, Alfa Romeo, all of those. I mean, some of them are electric already, but they are busy. I'm told the production lines are full. Now, surely it's just a matter of time before they start launching vans. One of the things that's interesting, and then we're going to open up the floor to questions, is electric cars become quite prolific. We see them everywhere, don't we? Teslas at every corner, aren't they? The thing that's likely to come next, I'm told, is big haulage. So articulated lorries, which I find fascinating. How is a lorry going to go and run on a battery? Well, apparently they are. And we're going to then see buses, trams, all becoming purely electric. I mean, trams, a lot of them are already, aren't they, with overhead cables. And then we're going to see the van we need in our little corner of the world. And we are a nightmare, aren't we, for the van industry?
Well, yeah, how can we get it last?
Well, I think that's just the way the industry is focused at the moment, because the van's hard, because it's not big enough to take the weight of the battery. But what's interesting, I believe this is 10 years away. Some people say, no, it's not, Matt, it's 5 years away. I think it's 10 years away. But I think it's important we start having the discussion now. But we're a nightmare for vans because we want to go a long way and we want to weigh a lot. We want to travel 300 miles and we want to take all our stuff with us. That's hard work for an EV. But the best thing about being last is all that technology and development and all those great brains that John talks about is all busy getting the best out of the technology, new innovations, new battery technology that's coming. Sodium-ion batteries are coming. They're much lighter, much more efficient. None of this evil lithium mining that we hear all these horrible stories about, kids digging mining for lithium and so on, which has been going on, that's true. But all this new technology is going to come and we are going to benefit from it on vans. And none of that's happened yet. It's all new. So it's one to watch. And I think it's a really exciting time to be alive. We're going to see this in our lifetime. All of us here are going to see this happen. You don't have to engage in it. You can still buy a diesel van second-hand after 2035, but it's going to be exciting. Now, has anyone here got a question for us? We've got 15 minutes. Go for it. We're going to pass the mic round. Thanks.
My concern is that we, in this country especially, we can't even generate enough electricity for domestic purposes, let alone for electric vehicles. I mean, I support them and I think that it's a great idea. And the charging points, if everybody in the country now changed their car for electric, 2/3 wouldn't be able to charge them.
Okay, that's a great question and a great concern.
That's actually a very good question, because on the screen behind you, we can see a little. Now, I'm obsessed with this website. This is called the National Grid Live. So we probably need to refresh the screen, because it will probably. So this is live. This is what the National Grid. This is what all our power, all our lights, everything that's going on in here right now. This is what we are running off. So we have no coal, because we've discontinued most of our coal power stations anyway. We've got very few of them left. So 33% right now, we are running completely renewable. So, yeah, I appreciate your question's right. Is like, yes, we have to be extremely careful on how we do it. However, there is lots and lots of infrastructure. At the national grid level, they are doing an awful lot to try and make sure that we're going to have enough power. And this is why we are ramping up as many renewables as we possibly can, because obviously what we've got to remember is all of this. It's a bit fuzzy for me. I can't see it from here. But you see, this, interconnectors, we're importing. This is what we're importing in this column. That's what we're using on the fossil fuel side. So none of this is secure. None of this energy is secure that we're using. So if the price of these go up, the price we see goes up as well. So if we can get this higher, it means our energy is actually more secure as well. But yeah, I'm obsessed with this website.
What's interesting about the UK and living here, one of the best things about it in terms of energy, is we are the windiest coastline in Europe, and we've got the most coastline of any country in Europe. If you think about the United Kingdom, we've got tons of coastline, and we're an island. And all around the coastline, there's £950 million of government money and £55 billion been borrowed by the National Grid. We have a podcast with a guy called Graham Cooper, who used to be head of futures at National Grid. In fact, it's 2 episodes because it was so deep dive. It's fascinating. And he talks about this in depth. And he was responsible for that 55 billion generation, that pot of money. And all that money is going to be spent on windmills in the sea. And we will be generating so much electricity as a country, we will be able to sell a huge percentage of what we generate to the rest of Europe. We're already selling electricity to Ireland.
Yeah, look, we're selling. We're minus to Ireland, so we're actually selling power to Ireland right now.
1 gigawatt to Ireland. Bless them. I hope we charged them a lot. But the point is, we're going to be a very, very wealthy country, and we are going to be able to export. We're going to have more than enough electric for our own consumption. And you're right, if we all plugged in our cars now, the grid possibly would struggle. I'm told it wouldn't, but it possibly would.
There is also more to be done with the vehicle to grid technology. So everybody that stops their vehicle and plugs their vehicle in doesn't necessarily need to charge. You know, if you drive to work in an electric vehicle and you plug your vehicle into at work and it's got 80% left in the battery, and you're not leaving for home until in the evening, that energy can actually be sold back to the grid during the day when it's high. And obviously you need to make sure you've got enough to get home, or you're charging that up just before you get back into the car.
But the point there is we've charged up at night when the electric is cheap.
Yeah.
And then we sell it during the day from our car battery. This is called two-way charging. We sell it back to the grid when it's most expensive, and then you drive home and charge it again when it's cheap. We're like Del Boy all of a sudden, aren't we? Selling electricity. We can all do this. This technology exists now. Now, one of the things I found interesting is going to a campsite. How do you recharge your motorhome at a campsite? And again, Graham said to me, what's interesting about campsites, they're often on the coast. Historically, the campsites have been furthest away from the power source, the nuclear power station or fossil fuel power station, and that energy had to go via the cities and then all the way to the coast to our campsites that we like to go to. Campsites are going to be in a very different position in the future. They're going to be right next to the windmills where the power's coming from. So they're going to be first in line to get a huge amount of electricity, and then it has to go to the cities, which is like turning the whole world upside down, isn't it? And this is the kind of education that I want us to receive as a pastime and a community of people that are going out into the countryside in our motorhomes. We need to understand how this change is going to affect us. And it's totally not as we're being presented by the mainstream media, I believe. So charging is going to be a big issue, isn't it? Two-way charging exists now, and it's going to become a real thing. So imagine you drive to the campsite, 100 miles, you then plug in at the campsite, not to charge, to sell it to the grid. Keep 100 miles in the tank, drive home. Happy days. Go and charge up at home when it's cheap again. Who'd have thought that? Has anyone heard of that before? Exactly. It's real. It can happen. And on campsites, we're going to start seeing pay for electricity. That's coming. A company called Metermax are installing grids with the the Caravan and Motorhome Club, where you tap your card or your phone to pay for your electric. This is coming with energy costs rocketing. Campsites, I mean, who's been paying 70 quid a night at a campsite? I have. It's ridiculous, isn't it? The prices are getting really silly. A lot of that is to offset the electric cost. So they're going to start introducing meters, so we pay for what we use.
Yeah, well, we've already got meters at our site. So
have you?
Yeah, 50p per kilowatt hour. So you are actually allowed to charge an electric vehicle there. They're quite happy if you
on the 16 amp hookup.
Yes.
Okay, well that would charge slowly though, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, slow. But yeah, if you're there for a week, it doesn't really matter, does it?
No, that's right. And a lot of campsites are now going to start installing electric charge points for cars. So caravanners with electric car and ultimately motorhomes. Anyone else got another question?
Yeah. Why are you looking at electric and not hydrogen for your
Great,
vehicle?
there it is, the H-bomb. Thank you very much. We're looking at electric because electric is real. It exists now. So electric is, the government kind of feels a little bit like they're railroading us down this path, doesn't it? I would agree with that statement. Hydrogen, I think, is viable for a future, but what the experts are telling me, it's viable for shipping and possibly heavy goods vehicles, yeah. So JCB are all over this, and they've created diggers that run on hydrogen. It's actually 4 times more expensive to produce per mile than electricity. So that just doesn't make it viable for cars right now until that cost comes down. And the same thing, while we're on the topic, is synthetic fuel. So often referred to as e-fuel. So this is fuel that doesn't generate any fossil waste or fossil fuel when it's created or when it's burnt. What's fascinating about e-fuel, and this is one to watch, is Formula One. So Formula One are going to start embracing it in
2026.
26.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any Formula One fans in the room. If they're not, it's certainly one to be aware of that's happening in only a few years' time. It's like LED lights. I remember someone said to me, LED lights were really expensive years ago, like anything, weren't they? And they said, once the motor trade adopt them, they'll just become mass consumed. And now an LED light, the cost is irrelevant, isn't it? An LED bulb. Saab were the first motor company to fit LED brake lights. And they were frightfully expensive. Saab were innovators in their time. It's so sad they're gone. And that was the transition. They then went mass market, and now most of our lights are LED. Loads of the new motorhomes are all LED on the back, aren't they? And even LED headlights as well. And we just accept it as the norm. So this change will become the norm. And yeah, hydrogen will be a factor. E-fuels will be a factor. There may be something else. We might be driving around with miniature nuclear power plants in the boot. Who knows? I don't know. But yeah, we are looking at it. But I think it's harder to become a reality.
It's funny you should say about Saab, actually. Saab have actually risen out of the ashes.
Have they?
They have. NEVs, National Electric Vehicle Sweden. They are now making vehicles, although it's still concept vehicles, but they do have a fantastic electric car, actually. 175 kilowatt battery, so absolutely huge on the battery. Probably a little bit too big in my mind, but it has actually got a range of roughly 600 miles between charges. It's in-wheel motors as well, so they've been beavering away through COVID because the engineers at Saab, they're still there. They've just got nothing to do, so they've been beavering away making a very, very good new electric vehicle.
Good news for all the architects in the room. That's who always drove a Saab, wasn't it? You're an architect or an accountant, in my experience. Any other question?
Thank you. The fire service being retrained at the moment for electric vehicles.
Yeah.
How would you feel if your family member was in one of these accidents and the fire crew have to check out the configuration of the electrics? because they're all going to be different from different companies.
I witnessed this firsthand, if I can jump in on this.
Yeah, go.
Outside our offices, we had a road traffic collision. It was an electric BMW kind of X5 type four-wheel drive thing. I don't know what it was. Anyway, it's electric. And something drove in the back of it, a tipper truck. Dented the bumper, cracked the rear light, and then the tipper truck promptly drove into someone's front garden. So the fire service came. We were all focused on the tipper truck. And then they opened the boot of this BMW, and there was a dog in the boot. He'd just come from the vets with his leg all done up. So our attention then went to the dog. He was fine. And we thought, well, okay, this is, the driver of the tipper was fine, driver of the BMW was fine, and then the fire brigade went mad. They closed the road, sprayed the entire road with a white foam of some sort. I said, what are you doing? And we were all outside watching. We had an open day and it closed the road. It kind of ruined our plan. And they said, well, this is our protocol. This is an electric car. They closed the road, covered the whole road in white foam, and as you say, they got in the car and were whatever they were doing in the car, I don't really know. And the guy couldn't drive his car for 3 hours. It was a cracked rear light and a cracked bumper. And so, this is a concern for the fire brigade.
Because they couldn't just cut you out because they don't know the configuration of all the different vehicles.
So you mean if you're stuck in a car?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I don't know about that. Is there any fire service in here? 999's in here? No. So that's a great question. We'll take that one away and we'll ask them. We'll try and get someone from the fire service on the podcast to ask them, because that would concern me if my kids were in there. My son's at the back of the room, keeps waving at me, putting me off. But they know what to do in that scenario. That's the point the lady's making.
Obviously the infrastructure of these cars is completely different. It's new technology. Any time we go for new technology, we have to learn. And like you said, we've got to unlearn what we've done for 100 years. So all the new technology that's in these cars, the fire brigade have got to be very, very careful with what they do. It is a very difficult one, but like I say, it's new technology, and we've got to, I suppose, work with. Yes, well, we've. Yeah. It's,
it happens and we're all used to it. Nobody thinks about it.
Yeah, that's.
You're more danger in a petrol car than what you are in a battery car.
Yeah, I mean.
It's just one of these things that are spoken about. Oh, yes, certainly there's a problem, but compared to other problems, it's not as big as people make out.
Yes, it is very, very common that if an electric vehicle catches fire, then it makes the headlines, whereas we have internal combustion vehicle engined fires all day, every day, and none of those hit the headlines. So, it is, obviously, lithium-ion is exceptionally energy dense, so there's an awful lot of energy there. So the problem with lithium-ion is if it does catch fire, you can't put them out. Or we haven't worked out a way to put them out effectively yet. Now, the batteries are extremely safe, and statistically, you're very much more likely to die in a vehicle fire that's internal combustion than it would be for a battery electric vehicle. But it's another thing we need to really get our heads around, I think.